this week. I'm on it. Now, you brought a friend with you.
I have.
Yes, it's like sort of bring a friend to work day.
That's right, bring a friend to work day. This is my pal Stuart Hendrich, who I mentored when he did his landscape design degree at Cannington, and we've been good pals ever since and done all sorts of garden shenanigans, including winning gold at Chelsea 4 years ago. He was my splendid project manager, and now we can never get hold of him because he winters in Madeira in the south of France, building great gardens there and sending me pictures, thinking, I wish I could go out too.
But Stuart, born and bred Yeovil, though.
Yeah, of course, proper Somerset.
Yeah, great stuff. And have you been busy recently? A lot of people wanting the gardens as looking fab.
I've been back in the UK for about 2 weeks now. Just coming through France, Spain, Portugal, and like Kathy said, Madeira. You get back here, and people are just crying out for work to be done. But it's great to be back in Somerset. You know, the rest of the continent, they don't do it as well as we do it here, and it's such a green and pleasant land. It's just a great place to be.
He has to say that, though, doesn't
he? He does have to say that, but it wasn't difficult, was it?
No. Right, now, you'll be pleased to know that we have an absolute array of questions for you, smorgasbord of questions from all sorts of people. We've been to a garden centre and asked people to ask you questions.
Oh, you've been drumming up business. Well done.
Yeah, massively so. Now, so we'll go through a few of these.
All right.
And I will open the lines for your questions as well. 0345 303 1566 to call, or text Somerset in your message to 81333. But between the two of you, I think we're going to get through a lot today. So without further ado, let's play some music. And here's some of the questions. So here's the first one.
Hello, I'm Will, and I come from North Petherton. I'd like to ask Kathy if I need a special soil to grow my rhododendrons in. I want to plant some rhododendrons, but I'd like to plant them in the ground, and I wondered if there's a way I can do that.
Well, rhododendrons and Somerset don't always go together because they require acid soil, otherwise known as ericaceous. And unless you see your neighbours growing lovely big rhododendrons around you, I'd go a little bit easy, although you can put a rhododendron in soil and give it liming and, anti-liming salts, aluminium compounds and so on. It's never really successful. You'll get away with it for a few years and then slowly realise that your poor rhododendron leaves are getting smaller and smaller and a bit yellow and horrid. I would recommend growing it in an enormous tub of ericaceous compost and watering with rainwater, because our tap water is limey. It will do no good at all.
What I've seen, I've seen some things like camellias and rhododendrons doing really well in Somerset.
Camellias will.
But
Camellias
what I've noticed is if you're growing in a garden or a piece of land which was a field and has traditionally been a field, then they don't do so well. But if you're growing in a piece of land that was traditionally a woodland or in an area of near a woodland, then the soil seems to have a bit more acid in it.
I would think it's all years and years of the mulch of the leaves, which are naturally acid.
That's
so
right.
Edge of woodland, you might get away with it.
Yeah, they just seem to grow better in that kind of environment.
Yeah.
To the phones we go, and Jill is on the line in Cummich. Hi, Jill.
Oh, good morning, Ben. How are you?
I'm very good. And Kathy and Stuart are listening. What's your question?
Lovely. Well, it's on behalf of a friend, but he's too chicken to ring in. So I hope he's listening. But anyway, he keeps on me to ring into the gardening programs. Basically, he planted a row of hedge saplings last autumn. They're all staked properly, and a proper hole dug for them to go in, so they wouldn't have got broken roots or anything. But his main concern is now, and they've got the proper guards around them, the very strong plastic ones around them. His problem is the grass is getting quite high inside. What should he do? Does he have to get rid of the grass or mulch it, or what does he need to do?
Am I allowed to say weed killer on the radio, or am I going to get lynched for that when I leave the studio? If you've got a good glyphosate weed killer, a systemic weed killer, not a residual one, and you go around and very, very careful with it, make sure you don't get it on any of the new growth. That's actually the easiest way to deal with the situation.
Otherwise the trees are going to get choked, aren't they?
Yeah, that's it. It's about, especially in the first year, it's a fight for nutrient, it's a fight for water. And if you've got grasses in there, the trees aren't going to establish themselves very well. But if you go in there and try and rip these grasses out, you're likely to do just as much damage. So
no, he can do that, all right. Yeah.
So what I think the easiest course of action and the best way to deal with it is use a good glyphosate weed killer. And I hate to say that on the radio because I know I'm going to get lynched when I leave here.
That's great.
Well, I would also add put a nice mulch of wood chippings, and if you speak to your local tree surgeon, he's likely to have a large store and ask for nicely rotted ones. Don't pile them up against the stems, but just enough to stop the weeds coming back for lack of light.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Jill. 0345 303 1566 to call today. This is a very good question. It's a question I definitely want an answer to. Have a listen.
Hello, I'm Sue and I live in North Kerry, and I'd like to know what are the best plants to plant to attract butterflies and bees in the summer.
And why do you want to attract butterflies and bees?
Well, I think they're declining, and it's important that we have the right habitats for them so that we keep numbers up and they don't disappear altogether.
I'm going to be making a list of the suggestions to particularly attract bees. It's very important.
Bees, very important. Well, actually, butterflies is quite easy. Just grow lots of cabbages. You'll have more cabbage white butterflies than you ever really wanted to. But we don't really want to have those. For the bees, certainly, they are in decline, so the more we can do to help, the better. Sedums, buddleias, all the labiata little lipped petal plants like thymes and catmint, anything with a single daisy flower, all the rosacea family, that is the ones that little white or pale pink flowers that 5 petals and little stamens in the middle, which isn't just single roses, it's also cotoneasters, hawthorns, pyracantha, rowans. What the bees don't like is very double flowers because they can't get in to the stamens, and apparently they can't see dark red. So
Really?
Dark red roses are no good for bees.
No good at all.
And not the grasses. We will love our grasses, but they're actually wind pollinated rather than insect pollinated. Dandelions, they love dandelions.
Yeah.
Do we? I think we do,
Yeah,
have a few
very
dandelions. Apples and pears, and of course we are the apple county, and the more bees that are pollinating our cider apple trees, the more cider
better.
we get.
Hey,
Hurrah!
we're all happy.
And apparently anything white and yellow.
I think
like
also
those.
you've got to think about feeding them at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
I think you already said cotoneasters, and that's something that they don't really have a noticeable flower, but the bees thrive on them in the
absolutely
spring.
crawl all over them.
And, it's nice to have them in the summer, but you're going to need to give them something when they come out of hibernation. So, definitely
and they always used to
cotoneasters.
say with bees, a swarm of bees in May was worth a load of hay.
Yeah.
A swarm of bees in June, worth a silver spoon. A swarm of bees in July, not worth a fly. So you've got to feed them early.
Great. Great questions, great answers so far on the gardening phone in with Kathy and Stuart today. 0345 303 1566 to call. Text Somerset in your message to 81333. Email somerset@bbc.co.uk. Still lots of questions to get through. We're going to talk about lavender plants, carnations as well, even a sage bush and a cherry tree. Keep your questions coming in, please. Do plenty more after George Michael. Is the gardening phone in with Kathy Crouch from Donyet, who's been with us for the last 17,000 years on the programme.
Oh, is it that
how
old?
long
No
we've been
wonder I was
doing it.
feeling old.
It's a
Dear me.
debut appearance for Stuart Hendrich today, landscape designer from Yeovil. Next question, here we go.
Hello, I'm Amanda from Taunton. I'd like to ask your garden experts the difference between dianthus and carnations, because they are very similar and it's quite confusing.
Go.
Dianthus are both pinks and carnations. Carnations are tall and leggy and grown in greenhouses for buttonholes for weddings. Dianthus are pinks and grown outside, tend to be floppy and good for hanging over rockeries. Same genus, different size.
Very nice. Right, next question.
Hi, my name's David from Oldbury, and I'd like to ask about looking after lavender bushes in containers. I don't get much success with them, so mainly it's the aftercare, pruning, etc. When and how. So we've had a set, or 2 or 3, and not much success. They last a season, maybe 2, and that's it.
Stuart David's having a nightmare with his lavender.
Okay, well, lavenders, you need to basically mow them as much as your lawn before they set their flower. And then after they've flowered, as soon as they've gone, you need to be in there and pruning them again. Taking out any old dead wood, but it sounds to me like he's having a problem with nutrient and possibly water, because they aren't particularly hungry, but if you're growing them in container, you've got to remember to feed them.
Yeah. I love a lavender bush, Dave.
But plenty of grit. Not just
Grit.
the bag compost out of the peat
Yeah.
bag, plenty of grit. They do like good drainage, and in the winter wet, they can suffer and drown and look very sorry for themselves. And they're not very long-lived. Go and get some new ones.
Yeah, this is it.
Easy as that.
And they're lovely to have. 81333 to text in your questions. Start with Somerset. These are questions we've gathered from a garden centre in Taunton. We've got another one now.
Hello, I'm Fiona from Ilminster. I'd like to know how do I stop my sage bush getting mildew? My green sage keeps getting mildew and I can't use it in cooking, so I'd like to know how do I keep it clean from bugs and diseases?
We'll love a bit of sage in cooking.
This is quite an unusual one, that you actually get mildew when a plant is too dry. It stops perspiring, it blocks up the pores of the plants, and that's actually meant to be the cause of the mildew. So it can be counterintuitive to say, actually the plant is too dry and that's what's causing the mildew. Unless it's in a really shady area, then that's, for me, I find it quite surprising when I found that out, that it's actually dryness that can cause a mildew.
Also, they're not long-lived. I've found it's best to replace them every 3 or 4 years. I've got one that's half dead and looking a bit horrid, so I'm going to dig it out and put myself a new one in. Plenty of wind through its hair as well. They don't like a close situation where they get all damp and sweaty.
Is this a general theme with sort of herby things then, that if they don't live terribly long, you just got to keep replacing them?
Not necessarily, because something like fennel and lovage and oreganos, the deciduous herbs, will go on pretty much forever. But the Mediterranean rosemaries and sages and lavenders, they want a good gritty soil. They don't really like our claggy Somerset glaze.
And again, it's like the lavenders, you've got to keep them well clipped back, otherwise they just get too large and fall over and become ugly. So there's regular pruning, isn't it? Get them kept in a nice tight pattern.
Next question is all about something I'd love to grow in my garden. Have a listen.
Hello, my name is Suzanne. I would just like some information on the best way to plant a Prunus ocamum, which is a cherry tree. What are the requirements it needs and how do I look after it as it grows, please?
Cherry tree.
Oh, great. When you start, it's about preparation of the soil more than anything with all your planting.
Yeah.
You've got to make sure, when we do planting schemes for people, we like to make sure that the area is prepared at least a couple of months in advance so that you know it's weed free, the soil is conditioned to the right condition. You can just go out and buy a plant and chuck it in the ground, but it's not going to do as well as if you actually prepare it.
Yeah.
Staking, feeding, cherry trees in particular.
And also, it's not just a matter of digging a little bucket-sized hole in your horrid clay soil and stuffing the plant in, expecting it to do well. You should really be digging a pit fully a metre wide. And you don't have to go deep. A full spade's depth is fine. Fluff up that soil. Don't put lots of rich compost in. Roots don't need it. Plant it to the same depth as it was planted before. Many people plant too deep. Stake it. Doesn't have to be a tall stake, but it must be firm. And mulch it. Do not let it dry out in its first summer. Water well, and it should grow well for years.
One more question for you.
Hi, I'm Alotte from Taunton, and I would like to ask the expert how to prevent the black spot and rust on roses in the autumn.
Oh, black spot and rust on roses, always a pest. Again, good feeding and watering and hard pruning in the spring, so the growth is healthy and vigorous, and it is less likely to get the black spot. But also, old varieties are much more prone to disease. I would be looking at roses that are more than 20 years old to be growing a new border of roses elsewhere. They don't like going back in the same soil. And look for disease-resistant and black spot-resistant breeds. The old hybrid tea roses were dreadful for black spot. If you grow rugosa roses, they never get black spot.
Any key points before we finish from either of you? Look, from your point of view, Stuart, what should people really be thinking about as an absolute priority in the garden at this sort of time of year?
Well, now it's a really good time for doing renovation on old shrubs, but don't cut them into this, put in basin shape. Get into the centre of the plant, start at the bottom and take out the old branches, take out the old tire stuff and give the new stuff a chance to come through. Because there's lots of things you see, forsythias, Philadelphias, where people just prune them into a pudding basin and they just don't perform. Whereas actually what this plant wants to be is it wants to be tall and arching. So you take out the centre and you encourage it to be tall and arching.
Yeah.
Very nice,
it follows that if you took a quarter of their oldest branches out at the base every year, in 4 years' time you have a whole 100% new shrub, but elegant and arching right to the tips.
Anything else from you, Joanne?
Do all the housekeeping bits, the stuff they don't show you on Gardener's World. Sweeping the paths, pressure washing patios, clipping lawn edges, tidying up hedges, and just making it tidy after a whole 6 months of wet and misery. Just to smarten the place up and sweep the yard, it makes all the difference.
And then it's a nicer place to sit and have a glass of wine.
It is, yes.
Yeah?
You
That's what
had
it's all
to
about.
mention the wine, didn't you?
Always comes back to the booze on the show. Well, you've done brilliantly. We got through so much there, you two. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Absolute
very much, Ben.
pleasure.
Stuart Hendrich, landscape designer from Yeovil. Kathy Crouch from Donyett. We'll see you in a month's
Hendrich,
time.
it's Hendrich.
Hendrich.
They spelt it wrong.
Hendrich.
Just K is next
Stu
to
Gardens
H.
on Facebook if you want to know.
Hey, plug at the end.
Plug
there
at
as
the
well.
end. Yeah, get in
very
there.
Impressive. Good stuff. Thank you, guys.